Hello from Darrockland. I'm Jane, and today we are joined by Ben Pronk DSC. Welcome, Ben.
G'day, Jane. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Very well. Can I flip protocol on its head and ask you a question to start?
Okay, all right.
This is an ambush. How was the city to surf? I saw you and a bunch of your colleagues from the cohort ran it recently. How did it go?
It was really awesome. I think it was one thing trying to do it for yourself, but it was another thing trying to do it together. And Buddy, as you know, he was the one who really anticipated the whole thing. He helped us train weeks before. So yeah, it was really good. I liked it.
I last ran that race in 1996. Has
Oh wow.
Heartbreak Hill got any less steep?
I ran it 10 years ago. And I think it was about the same.
It's okay, so
Yeah.
it hasn't changed.
But I
Still
got
pretty
older
painful.
as well, so it's probably a
Yeah,
bit
yeah,
worse.
yeah, yeah. Maybe it got steeper or you got older or something.
That's right. So for most of us at the AGSM, you're a man who needs no introduction. But for the small part of listeners that don't know who you are yet, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, Ben?
Sure. So I'm currently the managing partner of a company called Mettle Global. We do a lot of work in the crisis leadership, resilience, and crisis management, leadership and resilience space. As part of that, I'm also really honoured and just stoked to be adjunct faculty with the Australian Graduate School of Management, which is clearly where you and I met. Prior to that, I spent my first career in the military. So I spent 24 years in uniform in the Army, most of that in the Special Air Service Regiment, which was amazing. Really, obviously, an interesting time from an operational perspective and a really great foundation, as it's turned out, to what I'm doing now in terms of exposure to leadership challenges, everything from sort of really tight, intimate tactical sort of level leadership, 5-person patrols in combat operations, all the way up to my last job as commanding officer of the SAS, where I got a lot more exposure to some of those organisational and strategic leadership challenges. So a great foundation from a practical experience. And then, as I said, I feel really just so fortunate to have been invited to become faculty with the AGSM to get a bit of an academic spin and provide some of that theory as well as some of the practical experience on the leadership front.
Mm. When you pivoted from a military career to a civilian life, was there a culture shock?
Yeah, there was. Yes. So short answer, very much. But in terms of a longer answer, I was so lucky, Jane, in that it was, I made the transition at a sort of time and stage of my own choosing. For me, I was at a position, the thing I loved most about the Army was serving in a unit, in particular that unit, the SAS, and I got to a stage in my career where I wouldn't be able to serve there anymore. There were no more jobs left for me in that unit. So even if I'd stayed in the Army, it wouldn't have been the same sort of experience. So it was a nice kind of, I guess, bookend. And so I feel very fortunate in that respect. I also feel very fortunate in the fact that I was able to then transition into something which I found equally stimulating and challenging and rewarding and fun, which is the work I'm doing now. So I think I got very lucky in that respect, which lessened the culture shock. But yeah, it's the Army, I think, in the military in general, it is, to use the cliche, it's kind of more than a job. It becomes part of your identity. And particularly, militaries for centuries have been taking young men and women and kind of molding them into a sort of part of this machine. And so you very much, it's integrated in terms of how you think and your expectations and particularly how you interact with other people and what you expect from your colleagues. And it is funny coming out of that kind of environment and realizing not all organizations do it that same way. So there was that bumpy transition.
What was the biggest culture shock that you experienced if you had to choose?
The biggest one for me is for all its difficulties and challenges and rewards. Any government job is a bit of a sheltered workshop. You would be doing really well to get sacked, and you're going to get paid every second Thursday. And then coming into a job where we started our own business, all of a sudden that realization that if I don't do work, if I don't get work, if I don't sort of pitch work, then we don't eat.
You're not going to get paid.
I'm not going to get paid. That was a real shock. I mean, surely you can just keep paying me as I continue to breathe, which is what it had been like for the last quarter of a century. So having to, that kind of eat what you kill type mentality, that was a shock. And I do remember kind of early in the piece having this, oh my God, sort of I guess moment where, gee, if we don't get some clients, we're about to go bust. I mean, we never were, but it was a change in focus, but not something that I found really panicking. I was again really lucky in that I started this business with a really great mate and a former military colleague, Tim Curtis, who had a bunch of experience in the commercial space. He'd gotten out of the army a bit earlier than I had. So I had that safety net of experience. So I had that phone a friend, what is a proposal? Apparently we need to invoice. How does that work? Those kind of dumb questions that Tim could field.
Yep. Nice. What about just an person-to-person interaction with anyone in the world? Has it changed, or did it change at all?
Yeah, it did. And I think it changed for the better. I think, I'd sort of ended up, it's funny, even within the army, as you post in and out of different jobs, there's different levels of status and that sort of thing. And I'd gotten out as the commanding officer of a relatively high profile unit. And so that carried with it some sort of status. And so I was the kind of top of this little pyramid, and I had an EA, and I, had people coming to visit, and, I'd get invited to all these D-list kind of celebrity events around Perth. And it was, on that, I was very lucky very early in my tenure. My RSM, Regimental Sergeant Major, who is essentially your right-hand person, the senior soldier in the unit, vastly more experienced than me, and this particular guy, Buzz, was just an outstanding human, really good person to have in that role. And he said, as we're getting invited to all these things and we're doing all this stuff, he said, remember, this is not you. This is not Ben Pronk. This is the position. And it really highlighted the fact that this was a custodial sort of thing. And a lot of this stuff was ambassadorial. So it wasn't about me as a human getting invited to these things. It was about me having the honour to represent this unit that meant a bit in the fabric of the Perth community. So that helped temper it. But transitioning from that straight into starting up your own small business, I remember really early in the piece, I'd gone from, commanding officer of the SAS, this sort of thing, to making these sort of sales calls and, oh, do you want to buy a vacuum cleaner sort of thing, and getting rebuffed. It was good for my ego. So that interaction, I think, really good for just learning new skills, very different environment, kind of starting back, I guess, at a lower sort of relative scale in terms of that status and hierarchical interaction. So yeah, that was a big change, but a positive one. I think that was really good for my soul to have knocked down a bit.
And your humility, that's right. How long did it take you to find your new ground, I guess, in the new life?
Again, we were really lucky. I reckon probably about 6 months to sort of get my head around the process. And there were a bunch of new skills. So a lot of the content, like I said, we do crisis management, leadership and resilience, which a lot of that stems from our military backgrounds, in terms of the practical stuff. But we've really tried, we don't want to just sort of be a business that says, oh, well, the army does it like this, so this is how you should do it. There are so many different contexts. And it did take me, and clearly I'm still learning, but it took me a long time to get my head around the application of some of these concepts within a corporate context. And then even then, we're working across all these different sectors. So getting an understanding of, what does a gold mine or how does a gold mine work, and how might crisis management processes need to fit in there versus an oil platform versus a not-for-profit in Myanmar versus an aged care facility versus, a water utility versus a railway. All of this is part of what I love about this job. It's the same principles, but the big challenge is applying it to the context.
Different context,
and different people. you can get, maybe on a sort of a mindset, there's one way of approaching a crisis with the people that are involved. It's going to be very different in an aged care home facing a COVID outbreak, different humans, different leadership requirements, different leadership styles, which I find fascinating and really fulfilling to try and deliver what we know is good content, but deliver in a way that's going to make sense to that audience.
How much of a crisis management success depends on the people involved, and how much of it depends on the framework?
Very much the former. We think it's a truism that a sort of poor team without a solid framework, well led, will have a much better result than the sort of swept up team and a good framework, but poor leadership. So the people matter. But in particular, the leadership, formal and informal, matters the most. And we've seen that time and again when part of our work is supporting clients through real life crises, fatalities, and everything, reputational incidents, all that sort of stuff. And even organisations where we haven't worked with them before, but they call us in after the incidents happened. If they've got good leaders but no framework, they're going to have a much better result than the ones that have all the stuff but just
lacking a
leaders
leader.
who are unable. Yeah. And it's tough, like leadership is tough writ large. Leadership in a crisis, you're not going to have all the information. There's a lot of ambiguity, a lot of pressure, a lot of emotion. It can be really hard for leaders who aren't used to making decisions in those imperfect information environments. And that can really puts the whole team behind the eight ball if the leader is unable to do that.
Okay, talking about leaders, hypothetical question. So person A is someone who is born with all of the leadership qualities, but lack any role model in their life, versus person B, you know where it's going, right? Born with zero qualities. But say this person B has several role models that guide them throughout life. Who will make the better leader by the time they're 40 or 50?
Yeah, can I add another sort of factor in? So person B, I think, but it also does depend on the individual's ability to treat leadership as a learnable skill. I think a lot of us tend to think, because leadership's what they call a soft skill, it's not like engineering or whatever that you can get a sort of formal degree in. A lot of us tend to think we can just develop it by osmosis, but if either of those individuals are able to treat this as any other skill, so they set themselves goals, deliberate sort of practice, they go about sort of implementing these kind of experiments and then collecting the data, seeing what works and constantly improving, then that person's going to have the better result. And I think it's like probably any skill, sometimes the person with all the natural, the innate talent doesn't have to work as hard, and they will soon get overtaken by someone who is working hard and applying those deliberate practice. And the mentors are massive. Having a sounding board. Ideally, I think the perfect mentor is someone who is outside of your chain of command, outside of your organization, but has a knowledge of your organization. That kind of combination, it can be a fantastic way of accelerating that learning loop.
Why is that, as opposed to someone who is in your chain of command but quite higher up?
Yeah, I mean, that can work, but I think there's always that sort of potential, even perception of a conflict of interest that, if you are being mentored by someone in your chain of command, then, are they being impartial to you, or is there favoritism? Or, if you tell them something, which you want to be honest and self-aware, and you want to be aware of all your shortfalls. And so, if you're got a really good, honest, open, transparent relationship with a mentor, you're probably telling them all the things you feel you suck at, or all the things you want to develop. But may not be the best if that person's then choosing you for the next job, if they've got that level of sort of super honest transparency. So those kind of things can sometimes come into it. But yeah, your point's a good one. Sometimes we don't always have that luxury, and the mentor within the organization can work as well.
Yep. Okay, awesome. So you're a son of an army pilot, helicopter pilot?
Yeah.
And you joined the army when you were 18.
Mm-hmm.
And then your younger brother, Dr. Dan, joined the army as well as a medical doctor.
Yes.
Your poor mum. Did she
Well,
ever
actually,
complain at one stage and just say, would someone just stay at home and do a boring 9 to 5 job?
well, I mean, it was quite funny because I was always going to join the army. And as you said, I finished school at 17. I took a year off, sort of a gap year type thing, and then joined the army straight away. So I was kind of a clear-cut thing. Dan was much more of a circuitous route. He was the kind of little kid in the baggy pants, and in fact, he was into rollerblades and skateboards and graffiti, and he was not the person most likely to join the army. So he came to a more circuitous route. Yeah, no, mum has been long suffering with that, obviously. I mean, it is a tough life, getting posted around a lot. It's very transient. I sort of put my wife through it, through the time I was in. So mum had that with her career as a speech therapist, sort of the chop and change. And it was quite, I guess it was interesting because Dad he finished flight training just as the Vietnam War ended. So he never deployed in 30 odd years that he was in the military. So mum never had to deal with that kind of operational stuff from a perspective of a wife, but clearly then sort of put up with a lot of it perspective of a mother. And so I think we sort of probably put her through a few sleepless nights, as we did our own wives, but down.
Yeah. Okay. As you know, I'm a fan of your podcast, The Unforgiving 60.
Thank you.
On one of the episodes, you mentioned about your time in Afghanistan where you were trying to hide from the enemy, and then there's this 10-year-old boy trying to tell the enemy where you were.
Yeah.
So it's quite, a Sophie's choice situation where you either take down a 10-year-old or leave your team exposed. Are you able to let us know what happened? And if you can't, maybe just tell us the key takeaway that you learned from that time?
Sure. Well, I can tell you what happened is we didn't sort of engage the boy, and a large part of it was because this was an exact topic that we discussed prior to that rotation. There's a movie called Lone Survivor. It's a Mark Wahlberg movie, which is based on a US Navy SEAL patrol that gets compromised in very similar circumstances. The actual incident upon which that movie is based had happened just prior to our deployment, so in the very early days of the Afghanistan deployments post 9/11. And so this was a topic. What do you do about the goat herder was the kind of topic. And certainly on our very first patrol, I think we'd been in the field for about 5 hours when we had to make that choice. We'd had this awful sort of long night insertion. Everything had gone wrong, and we had to try and climb this big hill to get to where we were supposed to be hiding for the day. And we were on this craggy, rocky sort of outcrop thing, and it was a very it was not an optimal position, but we thought, well, at least no one's going to come here. But then within about 15 minutes, we heard what was going to become a recurring sound throughout that rotation. That's the jingle of cowbells around goats, flocks of goats with bells. Next thing, the goats are on top of us. Next thing, the sort of small child's on top of us. And so we had that kind of decision right up front in that rotation. And then the particular incident you're talking about was a mission a bit later, where this kid was clearly taking an active part in hostilities. Now, this is where I think that friction and the uncertainty and the murkiness of real life, and in particular in combat, comes in. I mean, our rules of engagement said we could engage anyone taking an active part in hostilities. This kid clearly was. He was directing fire onto our position very accurately. And by the letter of the law, you could engage him. But clearly we'd had this discussion, and also, I mean, this is an unarmed small child. It was not, I guess, a sort of a moral or an ethical sort of move that any of us wanted to make. But I think, to your point about what does it highlight, it highlights that a lot of these things like, I mean, there's a wonderful George Orwell quote, you know, a situation from a distance seems very clear, but the closer to it you get, the vaguer it becomes. I think this kind of highlights just how complex some of these environments are, and the kind of context that, particularly in the military situation that people are being put in. You know, clearly no one wants to shoot a 10-year-old kid, but there are these situations that make those decisions less and less cut and dried, which I think, in light of how some of the investigations into these allegations of war crimes have panned out, I think, you know, our soldiers have been presented a number of those challenges, and you know, as the allegations are saying, that there's been different decision made under those sort of pressures, which, again, out of context after the event can seem pretty unappetizing.
Yeah. How do you think those type of decision making have changed the people around you, for better or worse?
I think one of the things I really have reflected on a lot, by and large, human beings don't like hurting each other, which is fantastic. And I think increasingly our society is more and more removed from violence, which again is fantastic. My business partner, his son just finished high school, and we're having a conversation with him, and incidentally talking about, you know, were there many punch-ups at school? You know, were people in fights? And he looked at us like, what are you talking about? Like, you know, what do you mean, people fighting at school? And I'm thinking, geez, you know, they're very different from my experience at school, where people were punching on all the time. And you know, I'm sure different schools have different situations, but it's becoming rarer and rarer, which is great. But what it does mean is that when people are put in positions where they need to legitimately apply violence, including up to lethal force in the military and some policing contexts, it is very abnormal. And my view of that kind of trajectory of the Australian experience and some of those war crimes allegations, to deal with that abnormal sort of circumstance, often you end up parking a little bit of your humanity. I mean, no matter how justified the engagement is, it's still a difficult thing to hurt or kill another human being. And so to get on with that job in a battlefield context, you probably need to park a little bit of yourself. And I think, you know, we kept exposing these guys to those sort of situations, you know, time and again over that decade plus deployment, you know, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 sort of rotations for some of these folk. My view is that sometimes maybe some of that humanity stayed a bit parked, which I think is incredibly unfortunate for the individuals concerned and for the wider organisation.
Yep. You also mentioned on a different podcast about a time when you just took down the bad guys, and it was almost this sort of anticlimactic event where you said, oh, it's almost like a non-event. You just pack up and then just move on, go back to base and move on. And yet on a separate time, you were talking about, you know, taking the little things in life and really appreciating, looking up and see all the colors. There's this almost beautiful irony in that, you know, in a highly intense situation, you're able to really dial it down. And yet in the most mundane type of experience, you're able to see and experience the little things. Do you think that's an intentional thing, or is it more of a subconscious decision that your body is trying to shelter you from?
That's an awesome connection you've just made, Jane, and I don't think I've actually ever thought about it in exactly that kind of linearity. I definitely think certainly the latter thing you mentioned about trying to notice the small things and trying to be able to focus on the beauty in my life, that is definitely something that I've developed probably after my time in the Army, and a lot of that through the work we've done on resilience and the research we've done there. Those kind of tools I'm finding really useful. To be able to focus on one thing, so, you know, like a Pomodoro technique or any of these kind of work-related focus tools, but also through some of the mindfulness and meditation sort of techniques, any of those kind of activities that are flexing those mental muscles that allow you to focus on one thing and really live in the moment, be in the present, I've found really useful and really beneficial. I think it probably, you could draw a direct sort of line from those kind of experiences. And I think, certainly with people who did suffer, and look, I've been, I think, again, really lucky in that to date have had no sort of, I guess, mental illness or post-traumatic stress, but colleagues who have, often get into this cycle of what they call maladaptive rumination. So just rumination like a cow chewing the cud, but imagine that with your thoughts just circling around in your head, these negative thoughts, and being able to use techniques like mindfulness, focus, gratitude to be able to try and break that cycle can be very useful.
Great. Which leads me to the next point, which is meditation. So you were one of the facilitators of Alice, and meditation was one of the key things that I learned through Alice, which was quite surprising because I didn't realize. I thought meditation is all about just blanking your mind and think about nothing, but it's a bit more than that, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your meditation journey, Ben?
Sure. First up, this is one of those things I wish I'd sort of known about or been doing a lot earlier. I've joked before that if you'd approached me and said you should be meditating when I was in the army, I reckon I would have just thought straight away, hippies, mung bean, garbage. And that's a massive mistake. And I do think, and I've said this before as well, I do think meditation in general has a bad PR problem. I think the turning point for me, or where I really started to get interest, is looking at the science behind it. We'd always use breathing techniques in the military, and I could get my head around that. It's a physiological thing. And there's a ton of physiology that's going on when you are using meditation and mindfulness practices. And, we now think of it as, I guess, gym training for your brain. It's to me very much that same process. You're flexing cognitive muscles, I suppose, deliberately bringing your attention to one thing or no things in a way to sort of allow you to focus on what you want to focus on. And to our earlier point, this helps with stuff like your work, being able to focus on one single thing when you're really busy and block out other distractions. And then, the gratitude type things, focusing on really beautiful things or tiny little details in your life. All of these are very positive aspects. So my particular journey, I guess it came that the catalyst for it was understanding a bit more of the science behind it. I've always really liked breathing-based meditation practices. I think breathing is a fascinating area and very much complementary with meditation. And so I went through sort of breathing practices. I then went into sort of guided meditation through the Calm app. Jeff Warren in particular, I used his sort of course, which I found a really accessible, no sort of bullshit kind of approach to meditation. And then just recently, we ran a retreat for a number of veterans, a DVA, Department of Veterans Affairs, co-facilitated activity. And we had an amazing transcendental meditation teacher, Erin Hoey, who Tim had done a TM course through her a number of years ago and kept saying to me, you've got to do this, got to do this, got to do this. And I kept meaning to, and anyway, I've got lots of excuses. But Erin took the whole sort of cohort over this 3 days through some TM type meditation practices, which I've been finding awesome. So my current sort of practice, or what I did this morning, spent about 10 minutes doing some breathing exercises. I love Wim Hof's stuff. So 3 rounds of Wim Hof breathing, and then into about 15 minutes of transcendental meditation, which is just a fantastic way of for me starting the day.
Yeah. So you've been doing that for the last 4 or 5 years?
Probably less. I reckon 3, 4, and then it was really only since we were really getting into the research for the book, which was mainly during 2020. So whatever that is, about 2 years, I guess, with any sort of consistency.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. And how have you changed? Do you notice any, or has your wife noticed any changes?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think I'm catching myself. We love there's a wonderful Viktor Frankl quote, between stimulus and response, there is a space, this idea that we can override our natural knee-jerk amygdala-driven sort of reaction to negative stimuli or threat stimuli. And a lot of the what I find really interesting research on meditation is about that, overriding the amygdala response and getting a more measured sort of reaction. And so I think I'm getting better at that. But for me personally, it's given me an increased set of tools to be able to deal with stuff. So I'm now in a bit better position when I'm feeling overwhelmed or feeling stressed or feeling a bit snarky. I've got a range of tools from very short term sort of, couple of cycles of breathing, through to sitting and just centering a bit more. And I think I've recognized that, rather than this being a discretionary thing that you can do if you can fit in, this needs to be part of your approach, just like your physical fitness. It needs to be something you're doing on a regular basis.
Nice.
I've also actually, before I leave, the Wim Hof breathing I find fascinating, and it's a whole other sort of subject. He's done all these sort of experiments where he's injected himself with botulin or some poison, E. coli or something, and reckons he's fought it off with his breathing. I'm not quite at that point, but I have had a couple of times where I've felt a bit lousy, like I'm coming down with something, and I've gone into sort of Wim Hof, and it's turned it around.
Oh, wow.
Probably completely just placebo or convincing myself or whatever, but there's something in there. There's something in that kind of it's Tumo breathing, but basically deliberate hyperventilation to trigger your sympathetic nervous system and then sort of bring on a parasympathetic response. There's definitely something in that, and I'm really enjoying continuing to sort of experiment with that.
And how did you do it? What did you do, and how many rounds did you do it for?
So the Wim Hof technique is essentially 30 deliberate hyperventilations, so 30 rapid breaths with no pause, which is designed to trigger your fight or flight response. It seems almost counterproductive that you try and get yourself stressed, but you then go into a breath hold period, which brings on that parasympathetic response, that really relaxing sort of state. So 30 quick breaths, followed by a breath hold of about 2 minutes, and then a sort of big inhale, and then back into that for 3 cycles.
Oh, wow.
And I find it in itself, it's a great sort of I guess reset and kind of chills you out, but it's a great way to start for me a meditation practice, because it very much puts you in that kind of relaxed mode, and I find it's much easier to get my head clear after doing the breathing.
Interesting. Do you know when you read a really good book and you put it away and then you pick it back up again in 10 years time and you're still reading the same book, same words in the same sentence, but having the totally different experience? Have you ever had that with meditation?
I certainly, the kind of stuff that pops in your head during meditation, I find really interesting. It was funny, during the pandemic, we were traveling a lot in 2019, like a ton internationally. And during the pandemic, when we weren't traveling, I kept having these kind of, particularly, and one of the things that I found with the Wim Hof breathing is during the breath hold, you can sometimes get these kind of out of body experiences, which I guess is probably not dissimilar to transcendental meditation. But I kept going to Changi Airport in Singapore. I'd have these weird out of nowhere suddenly being in
with the
Changi
waterfall.
Airport, with the waterfall, and they have these salt egg things. Everyone's got these salt egg bags that they carry around. For some reason, that featured as well. So those kind of things where you get these just out of nowhere type memories, I guess, pop in, which are always very pleasant.
What's the significance of Changi? Was that the last travel you did before the lockdown?
No, but we a lot through Southeast Asia. So, that was always the hub. We were
Port.
always
Yep.
going through Changi. And I think it's an amazing, like you say, the waterfall inside, and it's just this incredibly cosmopolitan sort of airport. And I like travel. Work travel is always exciting, and so it's a pleasant experience for me.
Yeah,
Not
you're
a
yearning for that
harried one.
travel again. You wanted
I
that.
think so. Yeah, but careful what you wish for. We're now back on planes again, and I'm
Yeah.
yearning for being back home.
Okay. So you're also an accomplished artist. Can you tell us a little bit more about that part of your life?
Actually, that I should have said. I mean, that was probably part of that journey into meditation. I'd always been fascinated by people who could draw. For all I've said about leadership being a learnable skill, I'd sort of convinced myself that art or being able to draw was something that you're either born with or you weren't. And then during my time as CEO of the SAS, we were traveling a lot. We were flying a lot in kind of commercial and military aircraft. And most of the work that I had, and it was a very busy job, but most of the work was classified. So I couldn't just take these documents or the sort of secret laptops on the plane. So I was constantly flying internationally and over to Canberra with not being able to sort of do much work. And so, once you've gone through every single movie on the Qantas in-flight entertainment, once you sort of hit this point. And so that was where I started drawing, and very much it became sort of this kind of proto meditation, and very much the same sort of thing. You'd find, I still find I go into that sort of flow state where, time passes and you're just so focused on the one thing. And I found it a really, I was surprised at how technical it was. That it's particularly portraiture. You've got to get the measurements right. If the eye's a bit far out, you've lost the likeness. So a lot of it is about measurement, but then it's also got this wonderful creative sort of side. So yeah, I got into it through I guess boredom, and then it became a really a great part of my daily routine in a very similar way to meditation.
Nice. Is that so you usually do portraits? Do you do any other
Yeah.
landscape or?
No, I'm the worst. And I guess again it could be a practice thing, but I developed some sort of level of confidence with portraiture, but my trees still look like the kind of thing your 5-year-old cousin would draw. Yeah, so no, portraits I'll stick to, I think.
Okay, nice. You're also a really good muso, apparently.
Again,
do you still do
not
that?
really good. No, I don't. And I keep feeling this will be something I come back to. My mother and I learned sort of to play the organ as kids, and then I got into guitar in high school on the back of, and now I'm showing my age, but Nirvana's Teen Spirit, when that came out, it was just such, the start of grunge, and sort of, I was really into Guns N' Roses at that stage, all really heavily guitar driven, sort of rock and punk, or blues and punk based sort of rock. So yeah, that got me into guitar, and I played sort of all the way through sort of my training, and then into the unit. We had a band in the unit, which is a really cool, great outlet. And again, that sort of creative side, and led to some amazing experiences. We used to play in pubs locally in Perth, and I think the only reason the pubs let us play or hired us to play was because they knew we'd bring a lot of thirsty soldiers in, and even though we sounded awful, they guaranteed the beer revenue. So that was cool. And then on one of the deployments in Afghanistan, they had this tour de force, so wonderful Australian sort of entertainers, comedians and musicians had come and sort of play for the troops. And this group came to Uruzgan province where we were located, and we hit them up and said, look, can we play this one song which had some significance to us? And they said, yeah, no worries. And so we sort of played that, and then Wayne Jones.
This is the Little Black Bird.
No. This one's
Okay.
actually Getting Away with It, a cover of a James song, which had a lot of significance
Okay.
for us at the time.
Okay.
But our lead singer, Wayne Jones, who's now the CEO of iFly, the indoor skydiving chain. Anyway, he hit up Angry Anderson, who was on tour as well, and said, "Oh, Angry, you want to sing backups for us?" So that was our peak. We played this gig
Nice.
with Angry Anderson singing backups. It was pretty cool.
Nice. Awesome. And recently you spent some time with the Nyamal people. Are you able
Yeah.
to let us know a little bit of that?
Of course. So this was through our consultancy. We'd had a bit to do with an amazing guy called Mark Walling. We actually interviewed him on our podcast, and Mark spent a massive part of his career working with Indigenous groups all throughout Australia, and he's currently working with the Nyamal Aboriginal Corporation. So the Nyamal people are an Indigenous group that have traditional sort of land up near Port Hedland, in the northwest of Western Australia. And we went out with the Nyamal Rangers. So within the Nyamal Aboriginal Corporation, the Rangers are a group who look at things like flora and fauna surveys, heritage surveys throughout their traditional land. And a lot of that is sort of overlapping with mining tenements and mining production. And so they work with the mining organisations to make sure that everything's done in an appropriate and ethical way. So yeah, the crux of that week we spent with the Nyamal Rangers was looking at helping to enhance their fieldcraft techniques, particularly things like navigation, making sure that they are able to sort of find, plot and reference areas of significance, flora, fauna and cultural, and sort of some of the fieldcraft techniques we used to use in the military. But it also, it was essentially a knowledge transfer. We learned so much about their country, about the challenges that their people have had. They were forcibly moved from their land sort of a number of generations back, which meant that they've lost touch with it in some ways. And so a big part of what the Nyamal Rangers are doing is bringing their younger people, their emerging leaders, back in touch with their land and sort of getting them back in touch with country, which is an incredibly rewarding endeavour to be part of.
What do you think of the Nyamal people that you met, and what can we learn from them?
Look, we talk about resilience, and we've done a lot of work on that clearly in through the book and all those sorts of things. But from a cultural perspective, they are incredibly resilient. They have had, as I said, historically some real injustices, I guess, leveraged against them, but are still sort of willing to sort of progress and make the best of the situation as they've currently got it. So I think that is a pretty important thing that we can learn. But it's also really interesting looking at the balance between embracing of contemporary technologies, things like GPS and drones and all that sort of stuff, with their traditional practices. And so it was great to talk to some of their elders about how they used to navigate and how they developed familiarity with the land. Clearly their ability to live off the land. We did some good eating out there, a lot of kangaroo and bush turkey and that sort of thing. And so it was that really good approach to sort of leverage the best of those, I guess, two worlds.
Integrate the two cultures together. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, which I think is a really positive way of progressing, particularly that ranger capability.
Yeah, awesome. The Resilience Retreat is coming up in October. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, we're very excited. So this is our first open enrollment program. We've run a number of retreats in the leadership and resilience space, but this is the first time we've done it on an open enrollment sort of basis up in Fitzroy Island, which we're also very excited about. Tim led the reconnaissance up there, which sounds like just an excuse to have a junket up to tropical North Queensland, but no, he's done an amazing job. Tim's sort of leading on development of this. But the intent of this is to give participants a much deeper understanding of the constituent elements of resilience, all the bits we've found through our research that contribute to overall resilience. But the real focus is on not only educating, but providing people with those tools that I mentioned before. So, it is one thing to talk about meditation. It's another thing to have someone like Erin Hoey provide that real in-depth immersion and give you the tangible sort of applied versions. And what we've tried to do with all of the tools, meditation, mindfulness, gratitude, breathing, exercise, work, sort of focus techniques, all of these sort of things, it's designed very much to be able to apply in real life. The theory is wonderful, and it's really important for us to have a sound academic underpinning to everything we do, but the tools need to work in our busy, messy, complex lives, and that's what the focus is at, giving people this suite of tools that they can walk away from the retreat with in a far better way to approach the development of their resilience in their busy lives.
Yep. And it's open for public, right? So it's not just
Absolutely.
military specific people,
No,
anyone from any parts of life.
Absolutely. And any age group, fitness level, background, any of that sort of stuff. We're in fact, Tim's just putting the final touches on an FAQ sort of page. But it is not a selection course. This is not SAS Australia meets Tropical North Queensland. This is very much designed as a sort of learning and sort of collective experience for all ages, all sort of backgrounds, all levels of fitness.
Awesome. So I got your book as well, The Resilience Shield. Hey. Can I share with you my favorite part of the book?
That'd be awesome.
It's actually at the very end, your acknowledgement. And I think for someone who is so accomplished in his previous career and being able to forge a new career and, reach that success as well, for you to be able to stay grounded and appreciative of your wife, your kids, and your friends, I think to me that is an excellent definition of success.
Thank you.
So thank you for being a good example.
No, I really appreciate that. And I mean, that was I guess a difficult part to write the acknowledgements, because there were so many people clearly who have contributed, but it was also a wonderful opportunity to just say how much I love the people around me and how fortunate I feel to have had all of those people, including obviously Michelle, Dr. Michelle Roberts, who is well known to yourself as director of the MBA program. Folk like that have just been incredible. I feel so very fortunate to have come across people like that.
Perfect. So before we close, I thought I've prepared a quickfire question. Are you up for a quickfire Monday?
Yep, go on.
Okay, so we have 2 minutes to answer these questions. Ready?
Okay.
Favorite ice cream flavor?
Vanilla.
What's your power song?
Extreme Ways by Moby.
Oh, okay. Finish the sentence. Life is
beautiful.
Nice. Your daughter just told you that she's going to join the army. What's your first reaction? I'm happy. It was such a good career for me. I think it is such a good start. It provides so many good things. No, I can deal with that. Okay, awesome. And in fact, my daughter, as a 13-year-old, the sooner she joins the army and gets out of my house, no, I say that very jokingly. She's wonderful. Yeah. I heard apparently 13 is the most contentious age for girls these days. So good luck. Well, we're hanging on to the fact that it might get better from here. And last question, what do you do? What do you do? What? Why do you do what you do? I think because it's fun. Tim and I have I guess a metric when we're making any business decision. Will this make our life better? That's the first question we ask when we're making any significant decision, taking on a new client, going into a new venture, trying something new. And better clearly doesn't, well, not clearly, but better doesn't always mean more money. Sometimes it might, but I really, I have this awful sort of thought in the back of my head that in 5 years' time, we might be making 10 times more money, but I'm dreading coming to work each day. That to me is not definition of success. So I think why we do what we do, we like helping people. That makes us feel positive and fulfilled. But at a very base level, if we can come to work each day excited about sort of the people we're working with, the clients we're dealing with, and the work we're doing,
then that ticks those boxes.
Perfect. All right. Well, Ben Pronk DSC, thank you so much for your time.
Jane, thank you. And thank you for such a great range of questions. That was a really cool conversation. I enjoyed it.
Likewise. Thanks, Ben.
Cheers.